friends. I'm going to read the third chapter of An Elk Dropped In. The chapter is titled, Mr. Moose Tells His Story. The world is a big place, and Christmas comes but once a year, which meant Santa Claus was really hard-pressed, doing everything necessary and getting it all done in one day. So at some point, he decided to distribute presents on Christmas Eve in some countries, as he does over here in Germany, and not until the next day, like in America and Great Britain. I interrupted Mr. Moose. Up till now, I'd always thought baby Jesus arrived on Christmas Eve, the world over. Mr. Moose shook his head. He said that baby Jesus was well known to Santerclaws and had his head full of nonsense. For example, sometimes the little child decided to give men and boys broken suspenders and fell about laughing when their trousers fell down in the street. There are just too many children in America for Santa Claus to visit every single house on foot. Well, he could if he wanted to, but what's his sled for? That contraption is an absolute miracle. Even the tiniest parts are carved from delicately worked wood, and the little bells and the runners are made of pure silver. Despite the staggering load it carries, in favorable weather conditions, the sled goes as fast, well, it's very fast. And why? Because it's pulled along by a number of reindeer who were given this responsible job long, long ago. At this point, Mr. Moose bared his teeth before counting out 8 names. I can remember only 4 of them: Dasher, Comet, Donner, and Blitzen. Kiki wrote down the rest. But Mr. Moose said it wasn't necessary. In America, apparently every child knows them all. You'd think a reindeer would be pleased and grateful to be allowed to help the boss. But I have to tell you, gratitude, not a bit of it. Those creatures are arrogant and conceited. They won't have anything to do with someone like me. Only eat the finest foods when they aren't busy grooming their fur and having their antlers polished to a shine. They even have their hooves polished. And if everything isn't exactly right, then they refuse to pull a sleigh. You know, there'd be millions of innocent children crying their eyes out if there weren't any presents on Christmas. And they're quite shameless the way they take advantage of it. Later on, Kiki showed me a picture of a reindeer. It was far more dainty than Mr. Moose, had lighter colored fur, and very beautiful eyes. It couldn't have been one of Santa Claus's reindeer, as its antlers were rather grubby. As far as the sled's concerned, and this is where we get to the nub of it all, obviously it only gets used once a year, at Christmas time. The rest of the time, it's left standing around practically useless. And then one of the bolts may come loose, a little bell may jam, the runners need to be recovered, and the reins inspected. All in all, it's a load of work. So in the run-up to Christmas, a complete overhaul takes place. Then there's the trial run. And this is where we elks come into the picture. Kiki was busy scribbling all this down. Since my lords the reindeer consider themselves too grand to make the trial runs, they're always just males, by the way, so much for your emancipation thingamajig. The boss always falls back on me and 3 buddies. I have to admit, we elks aren't the best runners, but we do have stamina and strength. A major cold weather front doesn't immediately make us go belly up, nor should it, for trial drives are not without danger. Otherwise, I'd never have gone off course over Ireland if one of the silver runners hadn't shot across a rain cloud. And yet, we're happy to do it. After all, what other elk gets to see as much of the world as we do? And from the air at that. Yes, it's a great honor working for Santa Claus. A great honor. Here you see him thinking about going up and pulling the trial run with Santa in his sled. Mr. Moose sounded a bit sad as he told us this. It upset him that the whole world knew about the reindeer and adored them, but no one ever mentioned the elks. My dream is that one day I'd be allowed to go on the great Christmas run, when the sled is working properly and glides along as if it's on feathers, so you hardly feel its weight, and the cold snow flies across your ears. But of course, there's no chance of that, as none of the reindeer would ever permit it. Nor would the boss. He's a great one for tradition. He's a nice enough old fellow, but if you ever contradict him, he can turn quite nasty. I wonder whether he's missing me. Of course, the most important question of all was how this business with the flying worked. Unfortunately, the little information Mr. Moose could give us was rather disappointing. Professional secret, not mine, but the boss's. How he manages to do it, lifting what amounts to be 300 kilos live weight per reindeer, plus the sled loaded with all those presents up into the air, I don't rightly know. I have a vague idea as it has something to do with the dust from the Milky Way that he carries around with him in little cloth bags. Whatever, without the boss's help, I can't fly. Talking is another matter. Once you've learned it, you never forget. But flying without the Milky Way powder simply isn't possible. Otherwise, I'd have invited you for a little air tour long ago. Kiki snapped her notebook shut. She still had a load of questions for Mr. Moose, but she wanted to leave them for another time. Together, we watched Mr. Moose as he polished off the next load of hay and 2 poached pears. Later on, I discovered that he likes jelly bears, preferably the red and green ones. That evening, I fell asleep right away. I dreamed about Santerclaws and his sled. We were shooting through the black night sky and through whirling snowflakes, pulled along by Mr. Moose and his friend. Mr. Moose was laughing happily, and whenever his strong hooves touched the clouds, they sprayed golden sparks into the winter sky. Well, I hope that you liked Chapter 3 of An Elk Dropped In. Merry Christmas.